In July 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, something impossible began. A woman named Frau Trophäa stepped into the street and started to dance. She didn't dance for joy or to celebrate a festival. She danced uncontrollably, arms flailing, feet stamping, body twisting in a rhythm only she could hear. Hours passed, and she didn't stop. Day turned into night, and still she moved, her body refusing to rest. Within a week, dozens of townsfolk had joined her. By the end of the month, there were hundreds, men, women, and children, dancing until their feet bled, collapsing from exhaustion, some even dying where they stood. This was the dancing plague of 1518, one of the strangest and most terrifying outbreaks in recorded history. Strasbourg, at the time, was part of the Holy Roman Empire. It was a bustling trade city on the Rhine, home to about 25,000 people. But it was also a city under stress. That summer was brutally hot. Crops had failed, famine threatened, and outbreaks of smallpox and leprosy were ravaging the population. On top of that, fear of God's punishment weighed heavily. People lived in a world where sin and disease were thought to go hand in hand. So when Frau Trophäa began her relentless dance, no one knew what to think. Some believed she was cursed, others thought she was possessed. Instead of stopping her, the city council actually built a stage and brought in musicians, thinking the best cure was to let the dancers dance it out. Imagine that, officials encouraging what would become one of the strangest mass hysterias in history. But things got out of control quickly. Eyewitnesses described 400 people caught in the frenzy, spinning and leaping day and night. Many collapsed from exhaustion. Others suffered strokes or heart attacks. Contemporary sources claim that dozens died, though the exact number is uncertain. Chroniclers at the time were shocked and horrified, writing of people who begged for the dancing to stop but couldn't control their own bodies. So what caused it? Historians and scientists have debated this for centuries, and the truth is still a mystery. There are three main theories. The first theory is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a toxic fungus that grows on rye in damp conditions, and when consumed, it can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and muscle spasms. It's even linked to the chemical structure of LSD. This would explain the strange physical symptoms. But there's a problem. Ergot poisoning usually makes people very weak and bedridden, not capable of dancing for hours on end. The second theory is mass hysteria, or what modern psychology calls a mass psychogenic illness. In other words, a community under intense stress experiences a shared, contagious psychological breakdown. The famine, disease, and religious fear in Strasbourg created the perfect conditions. People truly believed they were cursed, and in the grip of terror, their minds and bodies responded with uncontrollable movement. Cases of mass hysteria have been documented throughout history, from fainting fits in convents to laughing epidemics in schools. The third theory is more spiritual. Many at the time believed this was the curse of Saint Vitus, a Christian saint associated with dancing and convulsions. In fact, in parts of Europe, people thought that if you angered Saint Vitus, he would strike you with a dancing sickness. To protect themselves, pilgrims visited chapels dedicated to him, performing ritual dances to ward off the curse. In Strasbourg, desperate citizens even carried the afflicted to the shrine of Saint Vitus, hoping for a miracle cure. Fun fact, this wasn't the only outbreak. Dancing plagues had been recorded earlier in the Middle Ages, in towns along the Rhine and in the Low Countries. In 1374, for example, a huge outbreak in Aachen, Germany, saw thousands of people dancing in the streets, screaming that demons were pulling their limbs. The Strasbourg episode of 1518 was just the most famous and best documented. So how did it end? After weeks of chaos, the city authorities changed course. Realizing music and stages were making things worse, they banned public dancing, ordered the afflicted to be taken to shrines, and enforced fasting and prayer. Slowly, the epidemic burned itself out. By early September, the streets of Strasbourg were quiet again, but the event left a deep scar in the collective memory. Chroniclers recorded it as a terrifying example of divine punishment and human fragility. What's fascinating is how the story of the dancing plague bridges three worlds: medicine, psychology, and religion. To medieval people, this was a battle between saints and sinners. To modern scientists, it looks like a mix of stress, suggestion, and illness. To us today, it's a reminder of how fragile human communities are under pressure. When fear spreads, logic breaks down, and people can find themselves caught in currents stronger than reason. One more eerie note. Centuries later, dancing mania would inspire the naming of Sydenham's chorea, sometimes called Saint Vitus's dance, a real neurological disorder causing jerky, uncontrollable movements. The ghost of the medieval dancing plagues lives on in modern medicine, so next time you imagine the Middle Ages as static and simple, remember Strasbourg in the summer of 1518, when hundreds of men and women danced through the streets, not in joy, not in celebration, but in despair. They danced themselves to death, and history still doesn't know why. If you enjoyed this dive into one of the strangest events of the Middle Ages, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Forbidden History, and tell us in the comments, what's the weirdest unexplained event in history you'd like me to cover next?